Welcome back to Sunday Night Dinners with Deborah. So today we are going to be making a Pavlova. It's a dessert. This Sunday coming up, it is Mother's Day. And this is a pretty dessert that we're going to make that's pretty special. And so it celebrates all the mothers and the not mothers in our lives. Now, what a Pavlova is a baked meringue that's filled with cream and fruit. It's dead easy. No one ever tells you. It's a total secret. It just looks so impressive. Now, it's named after a ballerina named Anna Pavlova, who also inspired the architecture of the Sydney Opera House. The whole idea was to show the movement of her dress skirts, these huge waves that are elegant and beautiful. And the dessert is a meringue that's built up high and then filled with the cream. So it's kind of an homage to Anna Pavlova. So I am making a template, which is just a baking sheet with some parchment paper on top. And I'm taking a bowl the size that I want to make the Pavlova and just tracing around the bowl just to give the size that we want. And then we flip the paper over so the ink doesn't touch the Pavlova. So, very easy ingredients. We take 4 egg whites. Now, I am keeping my egg yolks in another bowl that I will set aside, and I'll make a custard with it, or a lemon curd, or a hollandaise sauce. And the egg whites will go straight into my mixer. So how I do it, it's a little dirty for your hands, but again, clean hands. I crack my egg and I let the white run out through my fingertips, keeping the yolk, and I did this the opposite way around, keeping the yolk in my hand. And now I set it, and the yolk broke as I dropped it. So I'm going to rinse off my hands. So I crack my white into the one bowl and my yolk into the other bowl. You want to be careful not to get any egg yolk in with your whites, because then your egg whites won't whip up as high. So I've got my 4 egg yolks that I'm just setting aside, and I've got my egg whites here going into my mixer. So I've got my egg whites in my mixer, and I'm going to put that up on medium. Actually, going up. That's good. Medium high. So one thing I have that a lot of people might not have, let's turn the mic away, is, let me turn it around to the English side, it's special fine sugar. They recommend for Pavlovas to use super fine sugar. And how you do that, if you don't have any special sugar, as the mixer goes on. So let's move over here a little bit. So one thing that you do with the sugar, regular sugar can become superfine sugar by putting it into a food processor and just pulsing it a couple of times. It just cuts up the sugar into a slightly smaller granule, and then it's easier to incorporate into whatever it is that you're mixing in. Quite often they recommend it for jams or jellies or desserts like a pavlova. And just as a fun fact, if you want icing sugar and you don't have any, white sugar, again, pulse into your food processor a bunch of times and keep going. You'll eventually have icing sugar. So our egg whites are getting frothy. I'm adding half of the sugar in. At a time. And I'm letting it go for 2 or 3 minutes. And let it go again, and I'll turn it up on even higher setting. So 5 minutes has passed, and I'm adding the last of the sugar, the second half of the sugar, and I'm letting it going for 2 more minutes on high. And the 2 minutes are done. I'm adding 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Now I happen to have some clear vanilla, and I'm using that. And there. So now we check the meringue. And how we do that is we take a look at it. Oh, beautiful. Look at that. There's no risk of that collapsing. Just what we want. We have 2 more ingredients to go into the meringue, and I've preheated my oven to 350 degrees. Fold in 1 teaspoon of cornstarch. That just helps with the structure of the pavlova while it bakes. And now a half teaspoon of cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is an additive used in baking. You don't use it very often. I think I've had this jar for 2 or 3 years, so a half teaspoon. But when it is used, when it's needed, nothing else is a substitute. So rather than go, and I just carefully fold this in, rather than go and spend $6, $7 at the grocery store for a bottle of the cream of tartar, go to your local bulk food store. Here where I am, it's Bulk Barn. So I've very gently folded that in. Cream of tartar, I think I paid about 19 cents for all of that. And it'll last me for years. And because it's an additive, it's not an herb or a spice, you don't have to worry about it going, getting stale, sitting on your cupboards for so long. Now we take this parchment paper that we drew the circle on, and we lay down about half of the meringue, and we fill up that circle. And that becomes the base of our meringue shell. Now, if you go ever so slightly over the edge of your drawing, that's just fine, because it's just a guide to show you how big or how small you want it. Now, this is a 4-egg meringue, and it does about a 7-inch shell, which is big enough for what we are wanting. So I've got this fairly, flat, fairly smooth. Now I take the rest of the meringue and I put it kind of at the edge, because we're building kind of a wall on the outer edges of the shell. And you don't have to worry about it being perfect at the moment, because we're going to go back to it and fuss around with it a little bit. Because remember, this is a simple dessert, but it's a pretty dessert. I have a hollow, which we will fill with the cream and the fruit. But here, We use the spatula to make pretty waves going all the way around. And you try and make it as kind of even as possible in the height, just for the aesthetics. Now, we take it over to the stove, we pop it in the oven, and right away, we turn the oven down to 200 degrees. That way you get the initial blast of heat that will kind of crisp up the outside of the meringue. And then since the heat's dropped right down, it dries out the meringue, which is exactly what we want. So the pavlova is in the oven. I turned it down to 200 and I have the timer on for 1 hour. Now, how long it takes depends on how big the pavlova is. If you're doing an 8 or a 9-inch size meringue, you're looking at about 1.5 hours. Because I did a 7-inch, roughly, 6.5, 7-inch, I'm doing it for 1 hour. If you want to do individual ones that are just personal size so that each person gets one on a plate, also incredibly pretty, it would be so much fun at Easter. Then you would put it in for 35 minutes. But here's what the secret is. After the timer rings at 1 hour, I don't open the oven. Turn the oven off and you leave it inside the oven. That way, it cools down slowly. Meringues tend to only crack and collapse when the temperature change is too dramatic. And so we'll come back in the morning and we'll see what our meringue is like. So it's the next day. Now what we have to do is make the filling. 35% cream, and that goes into our mixer. So 1 cup. And halfway through, once it gets whipping, we add in 2 tablespoons of white sugar. So now it's just gonna get loud. So it's halfway through the whipping. So I'm just gonna add those 2 tablespoons of white sugar. And we start it again. So we're done with the whipped cream. We wanna take a look at it. It's not dried out, but it's definitely at a stiff peak. That's what you want. Is we add in, I've got a 1/2 cup of blueberries. And one thing I did do is I went through them and made sure that there were no stems on the blueberries because you don't want to bite into them. I just add those. I have a can of mandarin oranges. They're really cheap. They're about 80 cents. And they're already sectioned off. So they're ready to go in. Now I'm not going to put in the whole can because I think that would overwhelm. So I'm going to do about 1/2 the can. And then I've got a banana that I'm just going to slice up. Now if you like strawberries or kiwi, have at her. Grapes would be lovely, raspberries, cherries. It really is whatever you enjoy and whoever you're preparing the dessert for enjoys. Just very gently mix up the fruit and the cream. So here's our meringue, and it's beautiful. And if you notice, there's a little bit of cracking, so that even though we kept it in the oven all night, it still cracked a little bit. But I'm going to set it up on the plate that I'm serving it on. The whipping cream and the fruit adds into almost like a glue to hold it together. Oh, there we go. Oh, yes. And you just pile all that cream right in the center. I want to make it look a little prettier, so I'm going to swirl it around a little. And you can hear the meringue the crust of it because it's crispy on the outside and it's tender on the inside. And now to finish off, I'm just going to set a couple of these oranges that I have left on top. I should have kept aside a couple slices of banana, but unfortunately I added it all into the mix. But I am going to go and get a couple more of my blueberries from my fridge just to add to the top. Our beautiful Pavlova. And that would be a beautiful finish to a Sunday night dinner. So I hope your Mother's Day, or your not Mother's Day, is a happy Sunday, and we'll see